do not have much time together for lunch today, but we have a very special guest with us. Brad Feld is a master, a leader in the world of entrepreneurship. I have learned more from very few. I've met Brad in passing, but I've learned the most through all of his writings. If any of you are familiar with startup communities back in 2012, these were the early days as this stuff started to evolve. And Venture Deals is another title that meant a lot to me as I went through my own entrepreneurial journeys. There are many more that I'll let Brad mention as well. But most recently, the Startup Community Way is so in depth, 300 pages of just really thoughtful things that I think as 1MC organizers, we understand, but there's so much complexity that goes into it. Brad and his co-author, Ian, just really did a remarkable job. As we were preparing for Summit, the focus was, going to be on the core program design and allowing our organizers to continue learning from each other. But I thought, what a neat chance to have Brad sneak in for a little casual lunch discussion. Maybe if we want to kick it off, I think for some quick structuring, I'll let Brad share a few introductory words. I've got a couple of quick questions to kind of get some contextual value for this group. But I want to let you marinate on what you've been thinking about and how the wisdom from Brad might be helpful. Brad, I'll kick it over to you, my friend. Welcome to 1MCOS and to the 1MC Midwest region.
Well, thanks. It's fun to be here. I appreciate Ben, looping me in for a fun lunch date. For those of you who don't know me, the very short bio is I'm a partner at a venture fund called Foundry Group. We invest in tech companies all across the US and also in venture funds. We've got about 32 partner funds that we've invested in. I'm a co-founder of Techstars and on the board and involved sort of actively in Techstars, but not in the day-to-day operating role. And that's been an incredible both journey and learning experience for me. And one of the things I'm most proud to be involved in. I've written now 7 books. The Startup Community Way is the 7th, all about entrepreneurship in various elements. One of my other really well-known books is a book called Venture Deals. And the subtitle is How to Be Smarter Than Your Lawyer and Venture Capitalist. So really written in 2012 before sort of Venture Deals became the thing that it's become today. I've got a long relationship with Kauffman Foundation going back to the early 1990s, 1993. I was an entrepreneur in residence for a couple of years, which was just a fancy word for a day-a-month consultant in the 1990s. I was originally an entrepreneur. I started a company in 1987 that I sold in 1993. Became an angel investor, did about 40 angel investments between 1994 and 96 with my own money, and then became a venture capital investor. I live in Boulder, Colorado, no kids. Until recently, 2 dogs, now just one. One of them passed away a few weeks ago. And my wife, Amy Batchelor. We've been together now almost 30 years. And we also have, we have no kids. I think I said that. And so we have a foundation called the Anchor Point Foundation. And one of our goals is to give away all our money while we're alive. So we're very active, obviously continuing to generate more money, but also philanthropically participating in lots and lots of different initiatives. In many different ways. I've really enjoyed being a seed investor in new entrepreneurial activities. An example of one that I just seed funded was a program called Black Parentpreneur that was started by a guy named James Oliver, an entrepreneur who wanted, was now a single parent of 2 kids, 50-year-old entrepreneur, Black man, and just like his whole peer set really struggling with being parents and entrepreneurs. And he really had this vision of starting a nonprofit to do it. So I provided the seed funding for that and helping amplify it. And I've done that for many sort of nonprofit startups over the years. Another one that some of you may be familiar with is something called Global Entrepreneurs in Residence, GEIR. which was a university entrepreneurship program for immigrants, and there's probably a couple of hundred people across the country at this point have been involved in the program in an active way, gotten visas, sort of helped with university entrepreneurial ecosystems in different towns across the country. And me and one other guy helped start that with a guy named Craig Montori who run it. So, a lot of that kind of activity, and then a lot of activity philanthropically with larger organizations like the Nature Conservancy, where my wife Amy's on the board, and that sort of thing. So that's what we do. Live in Boulder, Colorado. I'm very afraid of COVID, the virus. So I've been very isolated. And really have only left my house 3 times since March 11th. I'm getting a little crunchy. Taking next week off for vacation completely and try to do some mental and emotional reset on some things. So that's me.
Very nice, Brad. Thank you. As you shared your personal moment there, I love your dedication in here. For Susie, co-founder of my favorite startup.
That's Ian's.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm sorry. I do like that for me in that. All right. I like yours too.
But read mine. Mine's good too. Mine's to Amy. I think it's to Amy, who supports me in all my endeavors or something like that.
That's exactly right. For Amy, who tirelessly supports me in all my endeavors. You're right. I think Ian's caught my attention because I called my little 4-year-old the startup that pays in love.
There you go. So Ian has 2 kids. One who's about 3 or 4, and the other who's less than a year old. Hey, Christine, good to see you. And anyway, Ian is, as a new father, right, 4 and 1, it has been remarkable how much his wife, Susie, has supported and been involved in the writing of this book, right? Because the book took us, we started it in 2017. So Teddy had just been born. His first kid had just been born when we started working on the book, or maybe, actually Teddy was born right after we started working on the book. So maybe 3 or 4 months after Ian and I started actually working.
Yeah, it's interesting that the relationships that you have within your family are not talked about as much within the entrepreneurial mindset. Having a co-founder in life can either take away from your momentum or really add energy to it. And so there's a lot that can be discussed in that. I do kind of want to shift gears. I had a couple of leading questions just to keep the contextual value for this group on point. I was able to share them with Brad beforehand. And so I want to open things up. I'm assuming that most of us in the room are familiar with Techstars. As an entrepreneur, I've always looked up to that program and the amount of entrepreneurs they're impacting, and the network that they've built worldwide is truly remarkable. When I think about that program and how it connects to 1 Million Cups and what we're doing with our core program design, Brad, I'm curious what your thoughts are on the importance of aligning the program designs to create sustained growth.
Yeah, so if and when somebody gets around to reading the Startup Community Way, you'll see that we build the whole notion of startup communities and entrepreneurial ecosystems, which are distinct things, and we talk about how and why they're distinct in the book, around the concept of a complex system and the idea of complexity theory. And one of the important things in complex systems is that you can't actually organize things from the top down. You actually build from the bottom up. And the inputs interact with each other and generate new outputs, which then become inputs. And over time, you have this non-deterministic outcome. And if you think about, program design, having a program design is important. So it's not that you just sort of do random shit and whatever happens, happens. But you have to be very flexible around what's going on over time. Like with a startup, you're going to run a bunch of experiments. Some of those experiments fail. When they fail, you should learn from them and then improve. And when they succeed, you should do more of it. And when startup experiments fail, you learn and then run new experiments. If you look at activities like Techstars, or even sub-activities within Techstars like Startup Weekend or Startup Week, or an accelerator, and you look at, and I shouldn't say activities, I say programs, then you look at programs like 1 Million Cups, they are overlapping in some ways. which is a positive attribute of a complex system, not a negative attribute, right? So they're overlapping, but not competing. They may be competing for people's time and attention, but that's okay because people have, well, they have a finite amount of time and attention. Neither of them soaks up everybody's time and attention entirely. And because there's some overlap, you can engage in both at the same time. And again, that thing that's scarce is your time and attention. So that overlap is good, but then they're also addressing different things. They're addressing different constituencies in some ways. They're active at different points in time. They have different networks that are colliding in different ways with each other. And I believe the key to all of it is to be incredibly inclusive. So the idea that the networks connect to each other is really important. And it's not that you have to formalize that connection and say, here's the strategic relationship between Techstars and 1 Million Cups. What you just want is you want a collaborative dynamic where you're doing things together when there's opportunities to do things together, where people are in both networks in a particular geography, but also across geographies. And where as you're doing things together, you try new stuff. And as you try new stuff, some of it doesn't work. And you're like, okay, that was interesting. It didn't work. Why didn't it work? And what can we do differently? And then you do some stuff together, you're like, wow, that worked great. Let's do more of that. Oh, that worked really good in Lawrence, Kansas. Let's do that in, 10 more cities. Oh, you tried them in 10 cities and it worked really well in cities that were under 500,000 people and it sucked in cities that were more than 500,000 people. And so again, you learn and you say, okay, well, we're going to keep doing this in smaller cities, but in bigger cities, we got to figure out some other approach to what we're doing here. That's the complex system at work, where it's continuing to evolve and engage. And it's not just obviously 1 Million Cups and Techstars, but it's anyone and any organization that's working around the entrepreneurial ecosystem or the startup community. And interestingly, in 2012, there was such a dearth of this stuff when I wrote the first book, the Startup Communities book, that it was quite easy, to like bump into other people and figure out how to start to do stuff. Now there's an overabundance of this stuff. And many of them are trying to compete and play now zero-sum games instead of positive-sum games. You either belong to this organization or you belong to that organization. And one of the things I'm trying to do right now is break down a lot of the bridges between them with this new book. So, you might say, well, Techstars competes with Founder Institute and competes with WeWork Labs and competes with this and competes with that. And I'm like, nonsense. Like, they're all additive. They all have a role. And so I'm showing up and participating in many of those other types of organizations, not nearly as in depth as I do, because again, my scarce resource is time, but trying to overlap them when they can and say, look, there's no reason why we can't, this WeWorks Lab thing that's going on over here can't overlap with this Techstars thing that's going on over here. Really, we're trying to benefit the entrepreneurs, not WeWorks or Techstars, so let's focus on that.
Yeah, that was on point. And actually, towards the end there, answered one of my questions associated with how ecosystem allies, like the ones you mentioned, Startup Weekend, 1 Million Cups, can collaborate to strengthen entrepreneurial ecosystems. And I think you addressed that really well there. Another quick thought, kind of associated with like the core program design of 1 Million Cups, and the fact that through the evolution of learning, as you're sharing about, we've seen the value of consistency. And so the question is, can the consistency of our weekly 1MC experiences in so many different types of ecosystems help simplify the complexity of a startup community?
No, but it's very additive. So, and the reason I say no is I don't think the goal is to simplify the complexity. It's a good phrase, Ben, and it's a good one to riff off of. Like, the natural thing that we do as humans is we try to organize and simplify things. And we try to control the outcomes, and we try to turn complex things into things that are deterministic. And I just don't think that that's important in the construct of startup communities or entrepreneurial ecosystems. It's also a very natural thing that people try to do from the top down, which is, okay, I need to get my mind around how to do this, so let's get some organization around this so we can manage it better. And that's in conflict with the way so many things work in entrepreneurship around complexity theory. The value though, but the question has a different, I think there's a different answer to the question. One of the things that's very powerful in a startup community is repetition. And repetition that does not require consistent behavior or consistent outcome. And so one of the things that's neat about 1 Million Cups, and I think you're probably familiar with Open Coffee Club, which was very popular sort of, I think it existed before 1 Million Cups. I think 1 Million Cups has had better sort of long run because of the support from Kauffman and sort of the institutionalization of the thing. Kind of similar, right? In the value of having every week, same place, same time, convening of people who are interested in entrepreneurship, people who are entrepreneurs, people who are starting their companies, no price of admission, and the ability to engage and communicate. And then within that city or within that event, a little bit of structure, not zero, right? If all you did was you showed up every week for 2 hours, it's like, hey, here we are, good to see everybody. And it was just a 2-hour networking thing. That would run its course, right? So figuring out some ways to have some rhythm within whatever you're doing, and then linking all of those different things in different places everywhere else. And so the idea that you're now able to physically link or virtually link all the activities, in the world that we're living, like there's enormous amount of value for that. And that's one of the reasons why in a lot of startup communities, you see a set of weekly things, a set of monthly things that happen once a year for a chunk of time. And the key here, and some things that happen on random time periods, right? Startup weekends don't have a rhythm in a community. They just kind of happen when somebody decides, hey, let's do another startup weekend. And so I think that dynamic is very important because you want to super saturate the startup community with things. You want to have way more activities and events than one person can do. And you want to make it very easy for people to cycle in and out of certain things to stay fresh. And so if the only thing someone is doing in a startup community is 1 Million Cups, and they go to every single 1 Million Cups event in their city, and they go to every one for 10 years, that will be interesting, but it's not nearly enough for them. And it's not nearly enough for the startup community. And so that sort of movement amongst in between is important. By the way, you're only doing 1 Million Cups once a week. I don't know, is it 90 minutes or 2 hours? I don't remember.
It's an hour. Yep.
It's an hour. So it's only an hour, right? So it's an hour slot once a week. So if you're interested in entrepreneurship, you don't have to limit yourself to a 1 hour slot once a week.
So right? Are you suggesting we do 1 MC every day of the week?
No, I think,
I'm just kidding.
But my point would be 1 MC, but then within MC, one of the things to do that's powerful, and we did this in Boulder with Open Coffee Club, and it was very powerful in terms of getting things connected together. It doesn't have to be every week, but once a month. We would organize it in conjunction with another event or activity. And so Open Coffee Club, which was in the morning, would let's say 1 month, Boulder Beta was another program. It was a program where people showed off their software once a month and people gave feedback. It was like 4 or 5 companies would show things off. And it was an evening event. And it was not on the same Tuesday. It was like later in the week, Wednesday or Thursday, I can't remember. And so for 1 week that was Boulder Beta, everybody at Open Coffee committed to going to the Boulder Beta event. And everybody at Boulder Beta in the same week committed to going to the Open Coffee event. Again, Boulder Beta was once a month. And so the Tuesday, let's say it was Thursday night, the Tuesday morning was both Open Coffee members, and was hugely attended, plus Boulder Beta people. And then the Thursday night was Boulder Beta with Open Coffee people. And there's a little overlap between the two groups, which is probably how that first got made. Now, it wasn't that all the Boulder Beta people started coming to Open Coffee every week, and it wasn't vice versa, but there was this overlap that all of a sudden there was some cross-fertilization. And Open Coffee did that systematically with most of the activities that were happening in Boulder in 2012 or 2013. There were probably 30 of them at some point. And, like every other week, it would be a deliberate, it wouldn't necessarily be the whole group. It might just be the leader of the activity or a couple of leaders of the activity, and they get 20 minutes or 15 minutes to talk about the activity and what they did and invite people. And wasn't an advertisement for it. Hey, everybody stand up and say what you're doing next. It was much more of an engaged Q&A, but then the person participated in the rest of the other event. So I give that as an example, like rather than trying to organize and create simplicity, you're actually trying to extend your network and the tentacles of all the things, or the interlinkages into lots more stuff.
Yeah, the overlap and the connectivity it adds inclusivity, but also just sustainability. That's great. You know, Peter's in the room, and he's really been wrestling with the fact that he's been an organizer for 3 years, and you know he struggles with what's next. He has, you know, the love for his community, and he doesn't want anything to you know, go in the wrong direction. And so perhaps a question about like, you know, the value of fresh energy within a 1MC organizing team, maybe paired with the value of the sustained energy of someone who's committing long-term. And the lens that I take is like the value of long-term efforts that I'm reading about in the Startup Community Way. So maybe some commentary on the life cycle of a volunteer organizer.
Yeah, and I think I do probably a better job in Startup Communities than the first book, and which just came out in second edition. And I need to think about where it is in the Startup Community Way, but I know that I do a good job of this in the first book, which is there really are two types of leaders of these kinds of events. One is the starter, and the other is the manager. Hey, good to see the book, Bruce. Makes me smile to see them in the wild. It was that one was a lot of work. That one took 3 years, which is a long time for a book for me. So if you separate into these two categories, and it's not this distinct, and I don't really call them out. Joe's point that he just put up in Slack is right. Some founders are great at starting, and others are, you know, great at sort of running for a long period of time. The mix of both is really powerful if you can get the mix of both in what you're doing. And if you identify as somebody who likes to start new things, it doesn't mean you start a thing and you do it for 3 weeks and then you hand it off to somebody else. But, you know, after a year or 2 or 3, you know, it starts to become more routine. You're less excited about it week after week. For other people, they find a thing and they just love to run it week after week after week, or month after month after month for a long period of time. Having both of those on your organizing committee are really useful for 2 reasons. One is the starters, when they hit their point where they start to get bored or they start to feel routine a year or 2 in, if you hit that point, I see Bruce looks like he's talking. Maybe he's not talking to me. If you're talking to me, your mute's on. If you're not talking to me, then I'm not worried about it.
Continue.
When you hit that point of feeling somewhat bored and being less excited about sort of everything, what you should do is sort of hand off the reins and go start a new thing, and start a new thing that is connected to the thing you've been involved in organizing. So don't go start a new thing in a parallel universe that's just completely separate, but let it evolve. And if you're the kind of person that likes to do the thing over and over again, stay in it, but try to encourage on that organizing team new people all the time, including new people who might stick around for a little while and then move on, partly because every time you bring a new person in, again, complexity theory, it's going to modify what you're doing. You're going to have fresh ideas about how things work and how you're organizing pieces. And that's really key. I think a lot of people end up, there's 2 problems. A lot of people end up feeling trapped because they started a thing, they feel responsible for it, they want to hand it off to somebody else, but they don't have a way to do that. So the solution to that trappedness is to recruit co-partners and then be comfortable letting go of the running of it. Doesn't mean you can't show up, doesn't mean you can't be involved, but you don't have to be on the organizing team. And when you show up, everybody's going to be, you don't have to show up every time. When you show up once a month, everybody's going to be like, hey, it's awesome to see you. And like, it'll evolve how it evolves. And now you've started your new thing, whatever that new thing is. And I encourage people, when they feel that feeling of trappedness, or they feel that feeling of boredom, when you feel it for the very first time, that's not the moment that you make a cut and disconnect, but it's a moment where you start the evolution. And in a startup community, people who start multiple things and hand them off to others should be valued, you know, as much. I don't like to say valued more because I don't think that's right, but valued as much as somebody who consistently runs something for a very, very long period of time. Last comment on this, like fresh energy in things is key. And, this long-term view of 20 years, now I'm saying it's 20 years from today. So you always have to have a 20-year view, and your own ability to sustain your energy around something with a 20-year view requires that you figure yourself out some and understand what motivates you. And it's a challenge. I'll just describe it as a challenge for me. I go through these extended periods. I talk very openly about my own depressive episodes. I work very hard, and I get through these periods of time where I'm very bored with a bunch of the stuff I'm doing, or I feel oppressed by the amount of things I've got. I'm in a mode right now where I feel pretty overwhelmed and oppressed with my calendar because of both my work and the book launch, right? So the combination of those two things has been a lot. And combined with the dynamics around COVID, both me trying to be helpful with a handful of things around COVID, and then just natural life rhythms. And so, respecting that of yourself and of your co-organizers is another useful thing in the context of this.
That's good stuff, Brad. I've learned how good leaders allow others to lead. And your point about preparing the succession plan long before you kind of cut the cord in your current role will help, I think, generate the confidence that you might be looking for, knowing that your baby is safe with others and can allow you to stay connected without perhaps the trap that Brad talks about of not wanting to let go in fear. So the takeaway that I have is actually like connected to what you talked about earlier in that response, like adding the difference between the starters and, I don't know, Brad, what we call them, the maintainers, as another angle of diversity on your organizing team. And so getting excited about the newcomers, but knowing that the sustainability can weave together with some folks who have just really fallen in love and enjoyed being involved in that way on a more long-term basis.
Absolutely, very much. And I'm not sure the labeling. I'm not sure the labeling sticks for me in terms of maintainers versus.
No, that's not
creators,
it.
But when I say I'm not sure the labeling sticks, like I don't know that it'll stick with me, but I very much agree with the statement that you just made. And somebody had made a comment earlier in the thread, I lost it, about the in crowd versus the out crowd, and this potential challenge of creating in startup communities the in crowd. I see that happen everywhere. And, part of my mantra is be inclusive of anyone who wants to engage at any level. Every now and then you get a bad actor in the system for some reason. And usually my own experience is usually the organism over time filters out the bad actor, or the organism does. So you don't have to have a concerted effort around the bad actor. But I find that the inclusivity is a real problem for people because there do become cliques. And you do have people you're more comfortable with rather than less comfortable, or somebody says something that pisses you off or offends you or upsets you, or you have a thing that you can't get resolution on. And we're humans, right? So we have emotions, and even if we want to be perfectly inclusive or we want to be collaborative, like I have a shitty day and I say something that hurts somebody's feelings. I mean, no one, I don't realize that I said something that hurt someone's feelings, but I really hurt their feelings. Like, one of the things that's powerful around inclusivity is if everybody has the ability to both be in the moment with each other, be responsive when something happens that hurts them, and for everybody else, be aware that you could be hurting other people with your thoughts and behaviors. And so trying to be inclusive and be open to making mistakes, both directions. I make mistakes and you make mistakes that hurt me. Instead of judging, which often we do in a business context, and we do certainly in many other contexts, political contexts, whatever, in a kind of community context, sort of saying, that's part of the bumpiness of getting to know each other. That's just part of life with humans. And to the extent that when you see those barriers start to go up, to make a concerted effort to lower the barriers, not to jump over them, but to lower them, to de-escalate the conflict, or say, hey, 1 Million Cups hasn't done anything with the Startup Weekend gang in a while. Let's do a joint 1 Million Cup Startup Weekend thing. And sort of natural human reaction would be to wait for the Startup Weekend people to come over to you and say, let's do it. The proactive thing would be to say, I recognize that there seems to be some competition going in our town now between these two different groups. Instead of waiting for the other group to capitulate, let's just go partner with them and get past this.
Very cool. Very cool. This has been a treat, Brad. Thanks again for joining us, my friend.
Sure.
I just threw something in the chat. I have a little surprise gift for the group. It's yet to be released. However, when the audiobook version comes out for the Startup Community Way, if you want to email me, I will deliver that to you as a gift to really be something that can continue to inspire you much bigger than 1MC. And I've only gotten through like the first part of chapter 1, and I already have like 1 million dog tags. So I think it's such an important read. I might throw in Tribes from Seth Godin just to mix it in proper. But Brad, your thoughts, your wisdom, you and Ian's like research-driven commentary within this really work of art is so appreciative or so appreciated by community builders and people who are now calling themselves ecosystem builders before there was a term that really identified what these folks who are passionate about the art of connection have done unknowingly for so long. So that's a special gift that I want to share with everyone in this room. And please let me know if you'd be interested in having that free download once the audiobook is out, which I've been told is maybe a month or so away. So we'll have a chance to reconnect and maybe even set up a small book club. That might be fun with this group, knowing we had kind of a fun lunch together.
Ben, thanks for doing that. That's super sweet. And my understanding, the publisher Wiley does all the audiobook stuff. Although I read one of them that I did, the Startup Life book, I read the audiobook for it.
Oh, I didn't know that. All right, now I'm going to have to go listen to that. I love hearing the tone of the author.
It was hard. I did another one, which was Venture Deals, and I did it with Jason. We alternated chapters, and we weren't very happy with how it came out. So for Venture Deals 4, we just let the publisher do it with a professional reader. For Startup Life, it was fun, but it was really hard. It was like 2 days, and at the end of the 2 days, I was really pretty wiped out. And it came out pretty good for Startup Life because it's got more memoir and it's more personal and it's less technical. I kind of feel like for the Startup Community Way, this is one that a professional reader will do a better job with. Sort of my instinct is, could be wrong. But thanks also for the comment on the research. So Ian, my co-author, it was a good partnership on the book because he's a economist by training and a researcher by training, although he's entrepreneurial, and he's now is very, very deep in all kinds of ecosystem development stuff. And I'm much more anecdotal. And if you read the first, experiential. So if you read the first Startup Communities book, you know that the entire book was anecdotal and experiential. And with this book, we really tried to combine the two, right? We tried to have a lot of practical advice from experience, but we tried to support it with real research, and especially around the notion of complexity and complexity theory and complex systems, so that there was a real grounding versus just making a bunch of shit up and hoping people liked it.
Well, I want to finish with an inspirational thought from Brad, knowing that we are amongst volunteer 1MC organizers. Before we do, however, it would be amiss not to create the awkward moment of a screenshot. And so I'm going to grab my Community Startup Way book, maybe my 1MC with a 1 in front. And I don't know how to do a screenshot. Who's going to help me with a screenshot? I got two hands, a little busy.
And I can do a screenshot for you.
All right. That sounds great, Amy. All right. Everyone's got their video. I'll give you a second to grab any relics you might want and make sure you're looking in your camera. You know the rules. All right. 1, 2, 3.
Got it.
Oh, I even heard the sound coming through. We know it was real.
I think the internet needs that, so put that up on Twitter.
Yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun. You'll see it through 1MC Midwest, Brad. I love Twitter. Well, this is, like I said, been a really special treat, Brad. Thank you for your time today. We've had a full day before us, an inspirational morning, and still more conversations among us moving forward. As I mentioned, that gift is to all of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Brad, I don't think you need a copy, so we got no worries on quantity there. Amy, I'll hook you up as well, since you were a participant in this adventure. As we close things down, Brad, I gave you a moment to think about what you would encourage these folks, knowing that they're in all different places around the world, knowing that they all have different stories that they come from and different 1MC experiences that they're so graciously volunteering their time to help with. It's a loaded question, but how would you inspire such a group?
I have a long-standing belief that leaders don't motivate other people, that all they really do is create a context in which other people can be motivated. So I say that as a preface to my response, which is the work I'm doing is trying very, very broadly and very loudly to help people understand across the world the power of entrepreneurship, power of innovation, and the power of community around that. And it's just incredibly awesome to me to see organizations like 1 Million Cups and folks like y'all who are the leaders of the various pieces of it, providing evidence of that power. And so I just say, for me, it's inspiring to see you doing that. And I presume y'all are doing that because you're motivated by the same things I'm motivated by in that context as leaders, which is the power and importance of entrepreneurship, innovation, and community. And I think that coming out of the COVID crisis, working through the COVID crisis, but also coming out of the COVID crisis, I think this is going to be more important than ever to our society and to our species, because I think that there's going to be a very significant reconfiguration of many, 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 many things that happen from the bottom up, from, at individual levels and cities and states and countries on the planet. And I think that innovation, entrepreneurship, and people who are engaging with each other around that are going to be the driver of much of that, not all of that, but much of that change. And the network that you have already built and the network you're continuing to build and amplify is a key part of it. So I'd simply say thank you, because it's one of those things that is not alone, but among many is going to have a huge, huge future impact on us in the same way it's had a real past impact.